Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to continue my discussion from before with what happened to classic real-time strategy. This time though I'm going to focus on Warhammer 40k Dawn of War. So Dawn of War 3 came out a few years ago, I think it was 2017, 2016, somewhere around there. And one of the biggest things that people noticed right off the bat was that they reduced the number of playable factions. So in Dawn of War 2 Retribution, which was the newest one before Dawn of War 3, you could play as the Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines, the Eldar, the Orcs, the Tyranids, and the Imperial Guard. In the Last Stand expansion, or not really expansion, but it was a different game mode, you could also play as a Necron Overlord or a Tau battle suit. I'm not sure what they're actually called. And Dawn of War 3 started off and never expanded, so you only ever had those three factions, the Space Marine, the Eldar, and the Orcs. And right there, you've limited gameplay just immensely, and so it was a huge, huge failure for many reasons, including that one. The gameplay itself, I've played it, and there's pros and there's cons, but the cons far outweigh the pros. What I liked was that they brought back the more traditional base building. So like Dawn of War 2 Retribution, you had your one main building, and you just, expanded that. You didn't really add any new structures, defensive positions, anything like that. So Dawn of War 3 brought back actual base building, so you had different buildings for different units. Although you didn't have any base defenses, which was really kind of dumb. They also introduced super heavy units, so the Space Marines, you could have a few variants of Imperial Knights. The Eldar had their giant Wraith things, and the Orcs had their Morkanauts, Gorkanauts, and so forth, which was a really awesome addition, but again, because it's so limited in the factions, it really wasn't as good as it could have been. The cons, this is where, gosh, this game was just a mess. They tried to basically meld real-time strategy with MOBAs, or the massive online battle arena, whatever the hell it is, like League of Legends, for example. And it just was the worst of both worlds. You didn't have a lot of the main RTS mechanics, like using cover, except for these random heavy cover, quote-unquote, capture points that you actually have to capture, and then units inside have quote-unquote heavy cover, rather than just being able to, run up to a, low wall and take cover there, things like that. Things that you saw in classic RTS games like Dawn of War 2, Company of Heroes, so on and so forth. They replaced the individual retreat button for each unit with this en masse retreat function, which just was never actually useful except for when your base was getting swamped, because again, you couldn't build any defenses. And it made the game so much more difficult, because that was a key factor in keeping your units alive in previous Dawn of War installments and most RTS installments, is being able to tell them to retreat and have them immediately run back to base on their own. One of the things I loved about Dawn of War 2 was that you had your leader unit that basically was the leader of your army, and they could be upgraded with various equipment and powers and whatnot, and they led your army through battle. In Dawn of War 3, you don't really have that. You have these elite units that you can drop down after a certain period of time, but they don't really have that same kind of customization. Like, for example, the big main one was Gabriel Angelos, who is the chapter master for the Blood Ravens. But he didn't have that same kind of leadership ability. Like, he's a very good unit on his own, but this is where it kind of gets into the more MOBA aspect, because he's like your character in League of Legends. Like, he doesn't really meld well with the army, so he's kind of on his own. And it's really frustrating. The unit upgrades as well are very limited. Like in Dawn of War, you could upgrade, your Space Marines with, okay, you can give them a sergeant, you can give them, a heavy weapon as a rocket launcher, or a flamethrower, or a plasma gun, and they had all these different options. You could even upgrade their standard bolt guns. But in this one, it's like you only have the two options of plasma gun or flamer, and most other units don't even have upgrades. Like Assault Marines, like you can upgrade them through the upgrade building with power swords, but that's it. You can't give them, thunder hammers or anything like that. And I just feel like there's a lot missing because of that. And I know I'm focusing mostly on the Space Marine aspect, because that's honestly what I played most in Dawn of War 3, because the Eldar I'm just not a fan of in general. The orcs I love to play as, but the orcs in this one are just really clunky and hard to actually play, and a lot of their stuff just doesn't make any sense. Dawn of War 3 was just such a commercial failure. I can't see them trying to recover it at any point, honestly. As much as I would love to see a Dawn of War 4 that takes the flaws from this third one and reverses them and builds up and gets you all these new factions, I don't think it's going to happen. What I think, if anything, is going to happen is they're going to come out with a new 40k RTS. It's not going to be the Dawn of War series anymore. It's going to be some new IP, and they're going to be able to fix and replace a lot of those issues that were discovered with Dawn of War 3. What I would really like to see is a new RTS that goes back to that kind of old school style where you have the base building, you have all those great mechanics, cover and upgrading your units, and you have leader characters and things like that. But what I want to see them do is I want to see them make it so that it keeps up with the meta for the actual 40k tabletop game. What I mean is, like, there's so much interesting stuff going on in the lore with the tabletop that they need to drag it into the Dawn of War or the successor to Dawn of War. So what I mean by that is, for example, the Indomitus Crusade and the return of Reboot Guilliman, the Primarch. That would be an absolutely outstanding thing to cover in a real-time strategy game. Matter of fact, Battlefleet Gothic 2 actually does include Guilliman and the Indomitus fleet, which is fantastic. There's so many new settings, too, that you could have the Fall of Cadia, just the whole Dark Imperium storyline as a whole, Vigilus Awakening and Vigilus Defiant, or whatever that campaign was called. The current Psychic Awakening campaign, there's books coming out every month, and they all include new lore and new units and things like that, and I really would love to see that incorporated into a game. And the best thing is, from a business standpoint, Games Workshop loves making money. What they could do is they can make all these expansions DLC for this base game. So you introduce the base game with, let's say, 4 or 5 factions. You got to have the basic Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, and a couple Xenos, right? But what they need to do then is they need to keep coming out with new content. So each month or so, you introduce a new faction or you introduce a new campaign line. And I hate having to buy everything separate. I want to buy it all as one, but just from a business perspective, this would make sense for Games Workshop. They can piecemeal it, so you have, okay, you want to play as Imperial Guard? Well, that's like $2.99, or something, whatever it is. And then you can just, buy that, and then as the game progresses, as these new campaigns come out, you get all the upgrades to that faction that come out with these new, so if there's like new characters or if there's new weapons or units, whatever, you get that as long as you have that expansion already. And then of course, if you buy it, you get it anyways. I would love to see more super heavy units as well. One of my favorite things is Imperial Knights. They're so much fun to play on the tabletop, albeit it's a rare occasion because they're, Imperial Knights. But including them as their own faction would be fantastic. But I also want to see all the other factions because there are so many. I don't want to see just one Chaos faction. I want to see Thousand Sons. I want to see Death Guard. I want to see all these ones that you don't necessarily associate with each other. I want to see individual units for each of the Space Marines. Like, I don't want to just have generic Space Marines. Like, if I play Blood Angels, I want to have Death Companies. I want to have Mephiston. I want to have Dante. And same goes for, all the other Space Marine chapters, Space Wolves and things like that are so distinct from each other. I want to see that. I want to see Imperial Guard, but I don't just want to see generic Cadians. I want to see Catachan. I want to see Death Corps of Krieg, and all their unique units as well. And really the same goes for all of the factions. Like, there's so many main factions, but then there's so many sub-factions. There's just a plethora of things that you could include in the game. And again, if you make it DLC, that's a shit ton of money for Games Workshop. That's kind of my 2 cents on all this anyways. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like this video, please click the like button, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do. That helps me out immensely. To my Patreon supporters, I love you guys. You guys support me so much. That's what makes all this happen. That's what makes this whole channel possible, and it's because of you guys that I get to keep doing this. And we will see you guys in the next video.